Good morning. It's good to be with you this morning, being able to share this morning. I want to take you back to February of 2012. I was privileged to be a part of the mission team that went on a medical mission to Kenya. Now, if any of you have flown halfway around the world, you know flying halfway around the world is an exercise in sleep deprivation. And going to Kenya was the same way. You leave and you're flying forever, and we got in Mombasa in the middle of the night. And it was pitch black even in the city. And we're, having been up a bazillion hours, we're all about 3/4 asleep anyway. We pile onto a bus, and they take us for the 2-hour trip down to our beach house. And it's pitch black. And we can't see anything. Even if we could keep our eyes open, we can't see anything. Get into the beach house, we fall in bed, go to sleep, get up the next morning at the beach house, and it was nice. It's a cool place. Beach house, and we had some breakfast, and they talked with us a little bit, and they took us out into the community, loaded us on the bus, took us out into the community, and it took me about 2 minutes to realize I had nothing in my past experience to connect this with. I was completely taken out of my element. I'd been overseas. I'd been on a mission trip to Panama. I'd been into Mexico, in here, been to Israel. I had nothing to connect this with. Nothing in my experience. It was out of a comfort zone. It was strange. It was new. It was a little bit on the frightening side. What's happening here? I tell that story because that's exactly where the church finds itself today. We've woken up and we've opened our eyes and we realize this world we live in, we can't connect it to anything that we know or experienced in the past. It's new, it's frightening, it's strange, and there's tension and there's worry in us of what's this world like and what's happened to it. Because there's a story here, and this story actually starts in the book of Acts. It starts in book of Acts, right after Acts chapter 2. It says the disciples, they were gaining believers in Jesus, but you got to remember, even at the time, even at the spot right there, it was still a small number of people. The followers of Jesus were a minority. And they were a minority that was hated by the Jews, hated by the Romans, basically hated by everybody. In those first churches, they would meet in houses. They didn't build fancy buildings like this. They met in houses. And they had secret symbols. You don't necessarily realize this. You know the little fish symbol that a lot of people wear these days? That started as a symbol of Christians in early Christianity because it was a symbol they could put up there and you could hide the fact. It's kind of the secret symbol. You know you're Christians. You could find a Christian there. They kept talking. They kept sharing. They kept spreading Jesus, talking about Jesus, but it was still fairly small. And you see the reactions that the believers got looking in the book of Acts. Stephen is stoned to death. Paul is stoned on multiple occasions and beaten on multiple occasions. 11 of the 12 apostles are killed and martyred for their faith. And this goes on for some 200 years. Until around 300 AD. In around 300 AD, there's a guy by the name of Constantine. Becomes emperor of Rome. And what Constantine does when he becomes emperor of Rome, Constantine converts to Christianity. Becomes a follower and a believer in Jesus Christ. And then what he does in here changes the course of the world. Because when he becomes a believer in Jesus Christ, he makes Christianity legal. For the first time in 200 years, it had been illegal beforehand. It had been open season on Christians. Now Constantine makes it legal. And what happens at that point is there's, if you want to call it a marriage, if you want to call it a partnership, whatever word you want to put in there, between the world and the culture and the church. In the world and the culture for the next 1,700 years go together. And you find the church is the major influence on society. The church and what it says is an influence on morals and culture. Church is an influence on society and its values. The church, in many cases, in some ages, was what shaped nations and brought nations down. The church was the major influence and the controlling voice in society. And something happened. And it's just recently that it's happened. That marriage or that partnership has gone like this. The church in society and the world are headed in completely different directions. Majority of Americans today will sit here and will say that the church is losing its influence on society. That's not the number. The statistic in that is the next question that they ask, is that a good thing? And a majority of those people said yes. It's a good thing that the church doesn't have a voice in society anymore. That's the world we're moving into. That's the world in which we live. The church is no longer the voice in society. The church is no longer the influence that it has. Give you a couple of things to connect it with. You just sitting here and process as you're sitting there trying to process it. And connect it with church attendance. It has been thrown around a lot of times that 50% of the people go to church. Well, the last statistic I saw said it wasn't 50% of the people going to church, it was 25. Only 25% of the people go to church with any regularity. The great moral questions of the day that we as a world and we as a society are struggling with, the church doesn't have a voice anymore. The social issues of the day, church doesn't have a voice anymore. It's decided by commentators and bloggers and social media and television and lawyers. The great society's great questions, church doesn't have an issue. Boundaries of what is acceptable and unacceptable is now ruled by the dollar, not by anything that God's Word says, not by anything that we think is decent. How people relate to each other even. Common values and how people relate to one another and communicate with one another and deal with one another. Church doesn't have a voice in that anymore. The church has been marginalized. It's been marginalized, it's been shoved off to the side. It says, you had your time, you're gone now. It's okay. And call it a shift. I like the word shift. Call it a tension. Call it whatever you want. But there's this tension and this shift that has taken place as the world and church has moved opposites from each other. But don't call it persecution. People will sit here and will say, we're persecuted because they took prayer out of schools. No, you're not. The fact that they make a baker or a shopkeeper sell their goods to a gay and lesbian couple, that's not persecution. Make sure we're clear on this. That's not persecution. That's what happens when we're living in a society that's full of this tension. That's just the byproducts of living in this tension-filled society. What's persecution? Take you back to Kenya. One day we were doing our medical stuff going on in Kenya. We had everything set up, and one of the mamas came in with toting several kids and comes in, and we had our nurses, our lady nurses were doing the pre-op stuff, or the screening stuff and all those things. And one of the mama came up to one of our nurses and said, I need to talk to a pastor. they came to us, and what's about? Well, I'm not sure and stuff. Well, the pastor of the church is here. He's probably the one to connect her to. Because whatever her question is, it's going to be connect her to. So we got to connect her to him, and he sat over there and talked to her for a long time. He came back over and told us, he said, she's accepted Christianity. She accepted Jesus. She's a believer in Jesus Christ. That's where she's at. But her family's all Muslim. And her husband's Muslim. And all his family's Muslim. If she says she's a believer in Jesus Christ, the best she can hope for is to be tossed out of her home without her kids, with no place to live and nothing for support. And the worst thing that could happen to her, well, you can figure that one out. That's persecution. Persecution is when things start blowing up. Persecution is when people start dying. Persecution is when this hate and this violence and this anger that people have start taking physical form. That's persecution. That's persecution in our world today. We don't suffer this persecution in our world, in this country. We do suffer and live into this tension that we have, this tension of being in this world where the shift has taken place in here. I talked about this with people this week, and I can read some of your faces as we're going through here, and I can read some of your faces, and some of you are really uncomfortable right now. I talked to some people at 8 o'clock, too. But at this point in the message, some of you are really uncomfortable. Because either you had it, didn't know it, or I'm telling you for the first time in here, but it's new and strange for you. Guess what? It's new and strange for all of us. They don't teach you this in seminary. They didn't teach it when I was in here. They didn't teach Pastor Short when he went to seminary. They didn't teach Pastor John when he went to seminary. They don't teach you this stuff in seminary. This is the realization in here of what's happened. None of us know what this future's like. None of us know what's going on in this world. None of we can describe what's happened, but we don't know what the future's going to look like. We don't know how this thing's transpiring. We don't know what's going on here. We're all living in this tension and all living in here in this new land. This foreign land that we all woke up and none of us realize it. But into this, Jesus brings a couple of things. Jesus brings a word here. In the midst of this, he's got a word for us in this story. If you got your bulletin, open it up to our gospel lesson in here. You got your Bible, open it up. I'm going to be in Matthew chapter 10, verse 29. Pick it up at verse 29. Jesus says, in verse 29, he says, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny?" Jesus' day, sparrows were the cheapest. The little of the birds, there was a zillion of them running around. Okay, it's like being in New York City or being in Chicago with pigeons. They're just there. There are so many of them. They have no value in here. There's the smallest and the innocent of the little birds. And Jesus is saying, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny?" In other words, this, all those worthless sparrows in here, Jesus knows everything that will happen to every one of those sparrows. Nothing happens to any of those sparrows that Jesus doesn't know about. He knows about every single one of them. And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And he goes on, verse 30, "But even the hairs of your head are all numbered." I got a joke here, but I'm not going to use it. Sorry, David. No, I'm not. "The hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows." His point simply this: we tell you over and over and over again, your identity is in Jesus Christ. It's who you are. He's washed you in baptism. He's made you a part of his family. He's called you by name. He says you are his. He stamped his name on you, filled you with his grace. That's who you are. That's the value you have. That's the value you have in the eyes of God, that he gave his son for your life. And he's simply saying, if God's going to take care of these cheap sparrows, don't you think he's going to take care of you? The crown of creation, the gift of his grace. He's going to take care of you. But as I sit here and I was talking with people this week, and right at this point in time, and people in this sermon, people were, the message that I was talking with people about, and they'd go, we got to do something. We got to do something right now. Somebody after the first service said, Pastor, I was ready to get up and fix something. We got to fix this. I go, yeah, we do have to do something. Before we talk about what we have to do, we need to understand something. He's still the Lord of the church. He's still the Lord of creation. This church is still his. And he has promised to not only take care of you, but guard and protect this church. That's his job, and he doesn't delegate. That's not your job. Your job is not to take care of this church. You don't have to go out there and protest. You don't have to go out there and picket. You don't have to go out there and march. You don't have to go out and sign petitions. You don't have to go out and flame Facebook. What God sends us out to do, it's so easy. He sends us out in this world to love God and love others. That's how we make an impact in this world. That's how we live in this tension. That's how we live in this tension of this world that's happening in a world we don't understand. That's the task God gives us to do. Go out, love God with all your heart, and love others. Go out and do that. Go out and live that way. That's our job. That's how we live in this world full of tension going out. One of the things that I realized when I was over in Kenya on that bus, sitting on that bus going out, and you saw the picture and the description of feeling completely lost and bewildered. It took 15, 20 minutes, my brain to adjust in here. But I got to the point where I realized I had to simply trust the people that were in charge. Trust the bus driver. Trust Shara, who was from the Kenyan field office, that they were going to take care of us, that we were okay. Even though I was in the middle of something I had no comprehension on, couldn't understand, I was okay. In the midst of something we don't understand, we can't comprehend, in a world that is foreign and strange to us, just know we're okay. The Lord of the church is still in charge. The one who loves us and stamped his value and his name on us still has his name and his value on us. He's not going to let us go. It comes down to trust. Simple trust in Jesus. Simple trust in Jesus, the life of a disciple. Amen.